Hi everyone, my name is Apuraj Garakapati. Welcome to my YouTube channel Amazing Apai. His strength. Again, Abel freezes and isn't able to outright deny it, which is all the information that Rachel needs. Immediately, she grabs Rachel's hand and drags her to the Tiger class to meet the boy that has been on everyone's mind. The two of them barge into Tiger class with Abel reluctantly following along with her friend. Everyone in the class freezes in shock as the two school beauties make their way through the class. Rachel stands on a target, but someone tries to come and scold her for suddenly leaping on another student's seat. She's able to completely confuse him by showing off how pretty she is, and Abel can only hold her head in embarrassment at her friend's actions. Eventually, she finds Gioma sleeping on his desk while Chloe fawns over him. Rachel at first mistakes Chloe for his girlfriend, but that doesn't matter to her, and it only makes this whole thing more fun. She walks up to Gioma and blows air lovingly into his ear, which shocks both Abel and Chloe. Then, as he slowly wakes up, she sits down on his desk with a flirty look on her face and asks him for his name. Gioma already knows who she is, though, and he's not excited to see another one of the game's heroines in front of him. All of a sudden, she leans her finger closer and pokes Gioma on the face, complimenting his looks while he just stares at her, shocked. He has no idea what's going on, but his intuition is screaming at him that this entire situation is dangerous. Suddenly, the hand that Rachel was about to use to poke Gioma is grabbed by a very angry-looking Chloe. Chloe demands to know what Rachel thinks she's doing, but her anger and murderous intent only amuse Rachel. It looks like Gioma's danger instincts were warning him about Chloe. Her personality has completely flipped as she spawns a box cutter from the yonder pocket dimension. If a knife fight breaks out in the classroom, it could spark some serious problems for him down the line. This is a combination he has never seen in the game before, and he can only wonder why this is happening all of a sudden. Abel comes in and tries to drag her friend out of the situation, especially since this isn't even their classroom, but Rachel won't budge. She claims that she's only here to say hello, and then, as if to pour salt in the wound, she places a hand on Chloe's head and tells her that she's not supposed to interrupt when adults are talking. That only makes Chloe even more angry, and she opens up the box cutter and prepares to strike. Gioma and Abel watch in shock as Chloe tries to stab Rachel, but her hand is easily grabbed by the much stronger girl. At this point, she's just pointlessly provoking Chloe into a fight, and Abel yells at her once again to stop what she's doing before something bad happens. Rachel frowns and quickly tosses Chloe away like paper, but Chloe is able to catch herself before falling, causing all the boys in class to scream out in joy at the building cat fight. Gioma is more annoyed than anything at the weird buildup happening in front of him. Then Rachel activates her blessing that's built from the foundation of her clan, the clan of the Spear Saint. In her clan, they believe that skills are useless when faced with overwhelming strength, and they believe that brute force triumphs over all else. That's the same motto that Rachel Demora, the niece of the Spear Saint, believes in as well. She bluntly asks Gioma if Chloe is her girlfriend, and our MC doesn't hesitate in saying no, and that causes Chloe's aggression to momentarily turn to him. He clarifies that she's just a friend, and Rachel seems to get even more interested in the whole ordeal. Meanwhile, Gioma is still trying to figure out just what in the world this whole situation is about. Now that he's more awake and has a chance to look around, he finally notices Abel, who looks just as frazzled as he was not too long ago. He cuts straight to the point and asks why the two of them came looking for him, and Rachel says it's because Abel was interested in him and wanted to see his face. Abel yells that her accusations are definitely not true, and it's Rachel that practically dragged her there. Rachel thought Abel genuinely wanted to see him because she followed her to the Tiger class. As the entire class's attention turns to her, she tries to shyly explain that there was a misunderstanding, but now Gioma just wants them to leave. He tells that to them bluntly, and that shocks the two girls, and Rachel can barely hold back her laughter. That makes her even more interested in Gioma, and she likes interesting guys. She tries inviting him over to her dorm room after class to do some ungodly things together, and that's the last straw for Chloe. She yells for Rachel to get away from her Gioma right this moment, and Rachel tries to mock her again, but Abel has had enough. Even she can barely hold back her anger at Rachel's flirting, sensing that things might be getting too far. Rachel finally backs off, but not before telling Gioma that she'll see him later, which he quickly refuses and tells her not to come back. The two girls finally leave the class, and Gioma immediately goes back to sleep, while Chloe rushes to check up on him. No one notices Abel pausing for a moment to stare longingly at Gioma before walking away. Abel and Rachel continue their walk back to their class, and Rachel can't get over just how impressed she was by Gioma's attitude. It's one thing to be cold, but from his hollow eyes, Rachel could faintly tell that there was an underlying subtle feeling that she could get her throat cut if she continued poking him like that. She was just curious about him, but he went far beyond her expectations and actually gave her chills. From the little she could see, she can already tell that he's easily a step above all the style with no substance students that are all over the star class. Her clan pulls no punches when it comes to getting betrothed to the most outstanding warriors, and in a way, he just might be a precious resource that she wouldn't want to let go of. Rachel turns around suddenly and apologizes to Abel. Abel, on the other hand, feels like she should apologize to the students of Tiger class for the scene she made, but that's not what Rachel meant. She's apologizing about Kang Gioma because going forward, she's not going to yield now that she's interested in him. Elsewhere in the school's clinic, Nox pulls himself angrily through the halls with only the thought of killing Gamma in his mind. He has lived his entire life without knowing defeat, constantly being called the auditor genius. Now someone has come and defeated him with nothing but kitchen knives. Just the thought of Gioma's face pisses him off to an outstanding degree. If he has to, he will call the power of his entire clan just to cut off Gioma's head. And then once he kills RMC, he will get Chloe back. Chloe has the potential to become similar, if not greater than him, and he won't let some random special admissions nobody take her away from him. All he has to do is call on the power of his clan to strike, and then they will show him. At least that's what should have happened, but the same Gioma that he has been relentlessly plotting to kill sits calmly in his clinic room, eating an apple. Before then though, while the class was in session, Gioma watched Chloe worry. The two girls have left, but Chloe is very clearly still upset, even though she was the one who pulled the blade out first. As she's having her psychotic thoughts, Gioma goes over to her in hopes of calming her down. Even though he can probably talk her out of whatever mental break she's about to have, he still wished she'd at least put the box cutter down when talking to him. He asks her about how Nox is doing, and she sadly tells him that her brother is in the academy's medical ward. That's odd though, since people can actually get injured in the subspace, so he shouldn't have any need for medical attention. The last Chloe heard, he was admitted into the ward despite having no injuries, but it should be fine, and there shouldn't be any reason for Gioma to worry. Gioma can't help but think about it though, even though he was sliced up in the subspace. Nox isn't the kind of person that would be weak enough to be traumatized from that. To make sure that nothing else happens, he has to check in on Nox, and to do that, he asks Chloe to tell him where Nox's room is. To sweeten the deal, he even pats her head, which is another tip he got from the How to Handle Yandir type series. That's how we got to where we are today, as Gioma stares down Nox, who is still surprised to see our MC'd in his room. Gioma comments on the room, and how the auditors must be loaded with cash for them to get a hospital room, this fancy for just one person. Before Nox can ask Gioma how he got into this room in the first place, our MC picks up a skinning knife from the bedside counter, and Nox momentarily goes on guard, wondering if Gioma wants to finish what he started. However, instead, Gioma simply picks up another apple and cleanly peels the skin off before placing it right back on the table. Then, Gioma gets up and walks right past Nox, advising him to take fruits and vegetables for his health. That pisses Nox off even more, and the assassin reveals a knife. Before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing Up High grow naturally. Hidden under his sleeve, ready to stab Gioma while he's least expecting it. But, as if predicting this, Gioma warns him that if he ever has ideas of getting any sort of revenge, then he will be cut up, along with the entirety of auditory. With that, Gioma slams the door shut as he leaves, and the force is harsh enough to turn the apple that he cleanly peeled into slices, revealing that he cut it up so fast that Nox didn't even notice. Geomao walks out of the medical unit with his mission hopefully accomplished. Now Nox is nothing more than a candle that can be extinguished at any time, and his will has been totally destroyed. This is all thanks to Geoma's bravado-filled intimidation, which he hopes doesn't come back to bite him. After all, the auditories are an incredible group of assassins, and there's no way that he can take on an entire clan with just 30 seconds of pain neutralizer. Although he should be able to take out 10 people in 30 seconds, the rest of the clan is an entirely different case, and that's only in the worst case scenario. Anyways, Geoma would love to avoid killing as much as he can. As he walks under the moonlight, back to his dorm room, he feels like he's standing in the eye of a storm in a weird way. He's starting to get used to this new crazy life of his. As long as Nox doesn't stir up any trouble, then he doesn't have to worry about things getting too insane. But he has another problem to deal with, and that's the girl that he wanted to avoid the most, Rachel Demura. In the original game, Rachel was the one who approached the main character first and eventually grew close to the main heroine, Abel. But now that she had chosen to approach him instead, it clearly meant the timeline had changed in a major way. On top of that, he also had to prepare for the midterms, and this time he actually needed to take things seriously if he wanted to earn the reward. The test required a group of 5 students who would work together to subdue a demonic monster. These 5 students would be selected regardless of their class, as the whole purpose of the test was to emphasize teamwork. While individual strength was important, trusting and relying on teammates mattered even more on the battlefield. In a situation like this, the smartest move for a weaker student was to find strong teammates and hope to be carried through. Still, it wasn't like the monsters themselves were a huge threat. The ones assigned for this test were deranged demonic monster mermen. Geoma remembered how disgustingly ugly they looked in the game, which meant facing them in real life would be even worse. If they were mermaids, at least they would have been somewhat pleasant to look at, but mermen were simply revolting. On the other hand, mermaids were classified as demonic humans and served as the main force of the demon army, making them far more powerful. Compared to demonic humans, demonic monsters were basically nothing more than guard dogs or pets. Thankfully, only mermen were expected to appear on the island, so the students wouldn't have to deal with demonic humans. It had already been a month since Geoma arrived at the academy, and this was the first night he had felt even a little at peace. 700 years had passed since humans and demons agreed to a truce. Still, just like human history itself, that peace had never been completely free of conflict, with both major and minor disputes occurring over time. One notable example was half a century ago, when Vasman, the commander of the 6th Legion, declared he would revive the commander of the 1st Legion. That single decision led to a week-long battle that drenched an entire city in blood. In the end, humanity came out victorious, giving rise to the 7 heroes. However, 3 of those heroes were lost, and after that, neither side wanted to push the conflict any further. Since then, peace had continued. Even so, Geoma couldn't help but question whether this was truly peace. The more he thought about it, the more terrifying it seemed that someone had managed to seal the 1st Legion commander alone 700 years ago, which meant that person must have been an absolute monster. In contrast, it had taken 7 people to defeat the 6th Legion commander, and even then, lives were lost. And now, with only 3 years left before the second human-demon war begins, the situation felt even heavier. This time, the Demon King himself would be involved. The thought of that future was terrifying, but worrying about it wouldn't change anything. Right now, Geoma needed to focus on the upcoming midterms. His first task was to form a team, but that was easier said than done since he didn't have any friends. However, he was currently the most famous student in the academy, and he figured he could use that to his advantage to solve this problem. There was no way he could stay unnoticed for the next 3 years anyway. Because of that, Geoma decided to change his approach. He would stop trying to live quietly, and instead aim to live comfortably, while making the most of his situation. With that in mind, he prepared himself to do everything he could to gather people and form his group. A week passed, yet nothing changed, and he still found himself completely alone without a single person inviting him into their group. In the end, it seemed like everyone was simply too scared of him. When he turned to look around the class, the only other person sitting alone just like him was Chloe. Maybe she had been pushed aside after the incident with her brother and his defeat, or maybe it was because of how she reacted when Rachel showed up. Whatever the reason, he walked up to her and asked if she still hadn't found anyone to team up with. Just like him, she was still alone, and that honestly made him worry a bit. He was already used to being by himself, but she at least used to have friends, and now they were all gone. Still, she calmly said she would be fine as long as she had him. Taking that as enough, he offered to team up with her so they could find 3 more members together. With Chloe's abilities, she was basically a massive advantage since he could only fight for 30 seconds, while she was like having 30 soldiers packed into one small, cute figure. That brief moment of peace shattered when Rachel suddenly burst into the classroom, calling out for Gioma. He didn't even try to hide the annoyance on his face at seeing her again, and Chloe didn't hide her bloodlust either, already pulling out a box cutter like she was ready to go wild. Rachel, completely ignoring the attention, kept bothering him, and even leaned over his desk before asking if he had found a group yet, since she clearly wasn't paying attention to anything else. He just answered her honestly, and hearing that he didn't have a group worked perfectly in her favor, as she'd immediately invited him to join hers. The offer felt suspicious right away, because someone like her would obviously have plenty of strong students lining up to join, so there was no reason for her to specifically come to him, but she casually explained that he just seemed more fun to team up with than anyone else in her class. He told her he had already teamed up with Chloe, but that didn't bother her either, since her group still had 2 empty spots. Even then, he couldn't shake off the feeling that this was risky for her, since teaming up like this could affect her grades if things went wrong during the island test. He looked over at Chloe, and after a moment she reluctantly nodded, agreeing to join, with nothing stopping him anymore. He accepted the offer, and Rachel instantly pulled out her phone to text someone while warning him that he couldn't back out now. Curious, he asked about the rest of the group members, and the moment he mentioned Leon, his mood dropped instantly. Not just any Leon, protagonist of this world, the one person he least wanted to get involved with. At that point he couldn't help but wonder what kind of sins he must have committed in his past life to end up with such terrible luck. Sure, he had spent 30 years handling a knife, but that was just part of his job. Somehow, despite trying to stay low-key, he kept getting dragged into situations with the heroines, and even worse, into the main storyline itself. Being around the heroines wasn't exactly a bad thing, since they were easy on the eyes, but Leon Van Reinhardt was a completely different problem, as the main character, interacting with him, could twist the entire plot in unpredictable ways. Right now, Gioma had no idea how things would unfold, but he was already convinced that somehow it would all end up being his fault. He even thought about trying to switch groups, but Rachel had already submitted his name in the application before even asking him properly. For the first time in his life, he seriously felt like cutting someone down, and unfortunately that someone was a girl. On top of that, there was still the biggest headache of all, the yandere sitting right beside him. Almost as if on cue, Chloe appeared next to him, asking what was wrong, since he had been looking completely frozen ever since Rachel left. He brushed it off, saying he was just overwhelmed at the idea of taking the exam with StarClass cadets. Chloe immediately reassured him, saying no one in StarClass was stronger than him, and he could only respond with a weak thank you. After all, he had chosen to team up with Chloe himself, so there was no way he could take the exam without her now. Thinking about it more calmly, this group might actually be the best option available to him. It could even turn out to be something good if only he wasn't being so negative about everything. He then asked Chloe about the time and place for their first group meeting, and she told him it would be held at a cafe on campus. Since it was almost time, he suggested they head there right away. They arrived first and ordered drinks, with Chloe happily getting herself an avocado smoothie, while he could only watch and envy, thinking about how expensive even one cup must be. Meanwhile, he settled for a cheap espresso, but the moment he took a sip, it tasted so awful. It almost felt like his body was rejecting it. Since the cafe was run by an outside company, faculty cards didn't work there, meaning he had to spend his own money for the first time. While silently regretting his life choices, his phone buzzed with a message from Rachel saying she was bringing the others. Not long after, she walked in with Leon and another guy following behind. That was the moment Gioma and Leon made their first real contact. As Gioma glanced at the other guy, His first impression was that the guy looked like some kind of delinquent. Leon was the first to step forward and introduce. Before we move ahead, please take a second to share on this video. Sharing helps this video reach friends who may also enjoy anime, gaming, travel, cricket, chess, career basics, or personal stories. Your support helps. Amazing Abhai grow naturally, himself extending his hand confidently. Geoma accepted the handshake, and Leon immediately complimented him on his performance in the subspace battle a few days ago. Just from the way he spoke, Geoma could tell he carried both intelligence and elegance naturally. After that, everyone sat down, and Rachel suggested they all introduced themselves properly. Leon went first, presenting himself as the leader of the group and a star class student. Somehow he had already taken the position of leader, and he genuinely seemed eager to work together with everyone. Rachel went next, but since everyone already knew her, she quickly passed the turn to the guy beside her. He introduced himself as Speed Weapon, also a star class student, keeping it short and direct, though Geoma couldn't help but focus more on how strange his name sounded. Then Chloe introduced herself as a Wolf class student who joined the group thanks to Geoma. But Rachel teased her for calling him Geoma-kun, which led to a brief tense stare between them before Chloe calmed herself down with a sigh and finished speaking. Finally, Geoma gave his own introduction, which was even shorter than Speed Weapon's, simply stating his name and class without adding anything else. Leon pulled out a laptop to officially begin the meeting, pressing a button that projected a holographic map of the exam area. The location was called Scapoli Island, and they would be transported there through a subspace gate to a specific point on the island. However, only the entry would involve subspace, meaning once they arrived, everything would be completely real, and they could actually get injured by the demonic beasts. Their assigned zone was the northeastern coast, where 3 different groups, including theirs, would be hunting mermen. Since the number of mermen in the area was limited, the goal of the exam was simple: hunt as many as possible within that limit. After explaining everything, Leon wrapped up the presentation and asked if anyone had questions. Speed Weapon spoke first, asking if there were any dangers on the island besides the mermen. Leon explained that the instructors had already thoroughly checked the area beforehand, ensuring that no other monsters or demons would be present. Then, Chloe asked whether groups could ambush or fight each other, which visibly shocked everyone else at the table. Leon calmly clarified that the exam was strictly about eliminating demonic beasts, and any conflict between groups would result in immediate disqualification. It was obvious that Chloe's question came from her assassin instincts. With no further questions, Leon ended the meeting and told everyone to focus on preparing for the midterms, adding that they would meet again the next day for another discussion. One by one, the others left the cafe, leaving only Geoma and Leon behind. The silence between them felt awkward, and Geoma quickly tried to leave, but Leon suddenly called out to him and asked where he came from. The question caught Geoma off guard, making him pause. As he tried to process it, he had heard something similar before, but coming from Leon, it felt completely different. Leon looked unusually serious while asking, and Geoma couldn't read his intentions at all. What made it even stranger was that Leon had waited until everyone else had left before asking. After a long silence, Leon apologized for bringing up such a question out of nowhere, and admitted that he couldn't shake the feeling that Geoma was similar to him. Even though the world's official language was Korean, because of the game's origin, that didn't mean other cultures didn't exist, and anyone could tell just by looking that Geoma was Korean. So Leon asking where he came from and claiming similarity only made things more confusing. Geoma stayed silent, struggling to make sense of the situation, and eventually Leon told him to forget the question entirely before standing up to leave. But Geoma stopped him and reflexively threw the same question back, asking where Leon came from. He regretted it instantly, but at the same time, he knew he wouldn't be able to rest without hearing the answer. Leon calmly took his hand and simply said he was from Germany before leaving without another word. Left alone, Geoma couldn't stop wondering what had just happened. When Leon first asked that question, it made him consider the possibility that the main character of the game might also be someone from another world. It sounded crazy, but it was still a real possibility. After all, There was no rule saying only one person could be transported into the game, and taking over the main character's role was far more likely than ending up as a side character. His gaze drifted toward the knife on the table, and an idea struck him. Whenever the blessing of the sword got activated, his senses became unusually sharp. Maybe triggering it would give him some kind of answer. He picked up the knife, removed its cover, and just as he hoped, a message formed in his mind, confirming that Leon truly belonged to this world. The voice he heard felt similar to the one he experienced when fighting Chloe while activating the blessing. However, just thinking too deeply about it caused a migraine that even bypassed his painless blessing. Still, one thing was certain. The Leon he had just met was exactly the same Leon from the game, something no actor could replicate so perfectly. Even so, Leon's sudden question about his origin and the claim that they were similar kept bothering him. To look for answers, he checked a wiki page, but there was no information about Leon in this world at all. Everything was starting to feel off, and Geomad decided that this would be the last time he'd involved himself with Leon. If something like this happened again, he would just go to Media for help, ignoring whatever attempts he made to drag him along. At the same time, he found it surprising how calm he had remained, despite everything happening around him. Maybe his blessings were influencing him more than he realized. He opened his status screen, and as usual, things seemed to be progressing steadily. His mental fortitude and armament remained unchanged, but his physical fortitude had increased thanks to his training. His armament would likely improve as well once he obtained Mirasama from the midterm exam. The only thing he couldn't figure out was his assimilation rate. It had increased significantly and seemed close to unlocking something new, possibly connected to everything he had done so far. Not knowing what it was still annoyed him, especially since there was no one he could ask about it. However, at the bottom of the status screen, something new caught his attention. His blessing of painlessness had extended by 10 seconds, meaning he could now use it for a total of 40 seconds. After all the effort he had put in, it finally felt like his hard work was paying off. As the days passed and the group continued meeting to plan their strategy for the exam, Geomad kept training, steadily sharpening his abilities. At last, the day of the exam arrived, and all the groups gathered in front of the subspace gate. The moment Geomad looked at it, he could tell this one felt completely different from the training ground subspace. Soon the rest of his team showed up as well, and they all seemed just as excited as he was. During their earlier meetings, they had already assigned roles to each member. Rachel would take the front as the main damage dealer, while Leon stayed in the center as the leader to coordinate everyone. Speedweapon would position himself behind Leon as support. Chloe would fight alongside Rachel as a secondary damage dealer, and Geomad would cover the rear, forming a well-balanced team. Taking a moment, Geomad looked over their equipment and couldn't help but feel impressed by how powerful everything was. Rachel was carrying an S-rank weapon known as the Vermilion Phoenix Halberd. Leon, even without Bowman, still wielded a strong sword. Then there was Speedweapon, whose gear turned out to be a recorder, which made Geomad wonder if the support role also included providing background music. Rachel quickly clarified that the recorder was actually one of the rare S-rank armaments capable of healing. Even Geomad knew how absurdly difficult it was to obtain healing-type S-rank equipment, making it incredibly valuable. Curious, he stepped closer to examine it, catching Speedweapon slightly off guard. Their conversation was interrupted when an announcement came through the speakers, declaring the start of the first-year midterms. Soon after, the Wolf class instructor, Lee Wonbin, approached the students. Since everyone already understood the rules, he kept things short, reminding them not to hesitate to retreat if things became dangerous, as risking their lives for extra credit wasn't worth it. If anyone got injured or wanted to surrender, they could simply call for the assigned instructor. With that, he encouraged them to do their best and not let nerves get the better of them. Noticing Chloe looking uneasy, Geomad asked what was bothering her. She admitted that she was worried about the possibility of mermaids appearing on the island. Geomad reassured her once again that the instructors had already confirmed the area was clear, but even so, she couldn't shake her anxiety. Growing up in Sicily, she had often heard stories about mermaids causing massive destruction. Although humans now had a truce with demonic beings, making such encounters rare outside of dungeons, the fact that these rumors still persisted made her uneasy, especially since the exact conditions for mermaid appearances were still unclear. Seeing her like that, Jioma gently placed a hand on her head to calm her down, just as the instructors called for the cadets to step through the gate. She gave a small smile and chose to trust him. Sometime later, Chloe vaguely heard Jioma's voice calling out to her through a hazy state of mind. Before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing Up High grow naturally. It seemed like she had lost focus for a moment, but when she opened her eyes, everything had already taken a turn for the worse. In front of her stood Jioma and the rest of the group, all facing something massive and dangerous. Rachel quickly asked Speedweapon if he could contact the instructor, but being inside a cave meant there was no signal on his phone. Nearby, someone lay on the ground, badly injured and bleeding, clearly in critical condition, and standing before them, the source of all this chaos was a mermaid. To understand how they ended up in such a situation, let's go back to see what happened before the group encountered this nightmare. The moment they arrived on Scapuli Island, the first major issue hit them instantly: motion sickness from passing through the gate. Everyone looked affected except Jioma, who casually mentioned that he didn't get motion sickness at all. Not long after recovering, they encountered their first merman. It froze for a second in surprise after spotting them, then quickly ran off. Despite how disgusting they looked, they were much smaller than Jioma had imagined. Leon pointed out that the one they saw was too small to earn them, so if they wanted proper targets, they needed to move toward their assigned area where adult mermen would be. Chloe moved ahead to scout, while the rest of the group followed behind at a steady pace. After some time, they reached the designated location, and Chloe returned to report her findings. About 500 meters ahead, there was a cave, and she led the group straight toward it. Even before stepping inside, they could already feel something was off. Dozens of eyes were watching them from within the darkness. Leon quickly estimated that there were around 50 to 60 mermen gathered inside, all surrounding a campfire. Taking down that many would easily secure them first place in the midterms, but it wasn't that simple. Entering the cave would cut off their internet connection, making it nearly impossible to contact an instructor if something went wrong. It was a clear high-risk, high-reward situation, and the final decision rested on Leon. Before arriving on the island, he had carefully assigned roles to every member, so now it was his responsibility to lead them again. Without wasting time, Leon made his call and signaled Rachel to begin the attack. She leaned back slightly and launched a golden spear straight into the cave. It struck the campfire directly, extinguishing it and throwing the merman into confusion. Before they could react, Rachel had already closed the distance, and in the next instant, several merman heads were sent flying. Right after that, Speedweapon stepped in, channeling his power to enhance Rachel's abilities, making it even easier for her to cut through the enemies one after another. Watching her in action, Jioma couldn't hold back his amazement at how insanely strong she was. Chloe noticed that reaction immediately, and without hesitation, she drew her katana, activated her blessing, and jumped into the fight as well. She rushed forward, rapidly cutting down mermen, trying to match Rachel's pace. As both of them charged toward each other from opposite sides, neither of them slowed down, even as they got closer and closer, and Jioma started worrying that neither had any intention of stopping. They came within inches of colliding before suddenly turning at the last second to eliminate the final merman rushing toward them. After that, they stepped apart and continued clearing out the remaining enemies, while Jioma let out a quiet sigh of relief, realizing his worries were unnecessary. In the end, with their combined strength, all 60 mermen were wiped out. With the area cleared, Leon suggested they move on to another location to continue the exam. That level of calm decision-making and leadership only reinforced in Jioma's mind that Leon truly was the main character of this world, because no one else could replicate that kind of heroic presence so naturally. However, as Jioma got lost in his thoughts for just a moment, everything suddenly flipped. When he looked back, he saw Leon collapse to the ground, having taken a fatal blow to the stomach. Shock spread across the group as something powerful rose from the pile of dead mermen behind Jioma. It was a demonoid mermaid, exactly the kind of monster Chloe had been worried about from the beginning. Jioma had already felt that things were going too smoothly, and now that uneasy feeling had proven right. The situation instantly turned critical, leaving them with a harsh choice: run or fight, but escaping while carrying an injured Leon might not even be possible. Rachel immediately told Speedweapon to contact the instructors and report the appearance of the mermaid, but just as Gyo-ma feared, the cave completely blocked their connection, leaving them unable to reach anyone. Panic began to spread among the group, and strangely, Gyo-ma was the only one who remained calm. With Leon out of action, someone had to take control, and Gyo-ma stepped forward to fill that role. He quickly started giving orders, telling Rachel to keep the mermaid occupied no matter what. Then he instructed Speedweapon to pour as much healing as possible into Leon. Finally, he called out to Chloe, who seemed momentarily frozen, and ordered her to evacuate the other cadets and to inform the instructors about what had happened. It took her a second to process everything, but she eventually snapped out of it and moved to carry out his command. With everyone assigned their roles, Gyo-ma stepped forward to face the mermaid himself, shocking the others. He told Rachel and Speedweapon to handle the remaining mermen, leaving the mermaid to him. After all, dealing with fish like that had always been his specialty. Demons possess a distinct power that is comparable to the blessings used by humans, and that power is called magic. It is strong enough to defeat the protagonist in a single strike, clearly showing the overwhelming difference and strength between demons and humans. Even though Gyo-ma has the blessing of the sword god, that alone does not guarantee that he will survive this fight. In the original game, defeating a demon that uses magic without forming a party was simply impossible, and yet, right now, he is about to face a boss alone that would normally require a full raid team. In simple terms, Gyo-ma is completely screwed, but there is no way for him to back out. At this point, Chloe will need about 10 minutes to find help and return, but Gyo-ma only has 40 seconds to take down this oversized fish before he ends up in a worse situation than the main character. At the same time, Rachel continues struggling to keep the merman away, while Speedweapon concentrates all of his power on healing Leon. The wound on Leon is deep, yet it is still recovering regardless. Even with such a difficult situation unfolding, Speedweapon cannot stop focusing on Gyo-ma. Just the sight of the mermaid makes his bones tremble, and yet Gyo-ma is willingly choosing to fight it alone. The demon makes the first move, firing the exact same laser attack that had taken Leon down earlier. Gyo-ma dodges the attack and immediately rushes forward with his knife, closing the distance between them. The mermaid appears to mainly rely on long-range attacks that carry water-based magic properties. Gyo-ma does not know much about magic itself, but what he does know is that this demon still has flesh and bones like any other creature. To win, all he needs to do is get close and cut it down. He leaps toward the demon and swings his blade, but the mermaid dodges the strike and immediately redirects its movement toward Speedweapon. Before it can reach him, Gyo-ma circles around and manages to slice off one of the creature's fins, making it scream out in pain. However, the cut is far too shallow. Gyo-ma immediately attempts another strike, but the demon quickly avoids it and dissolves into water. Since the mermaid targeted Speedweapon, it becomes clear that it is deliberately aiming for those who are already injured. At this point, Leon has recovered to some extent, and Speedweapon calls out to Gyo-ma, showing that he is still conscious. Gyo-ma briefly checks on him before charging back to confront the mermaid again. From Speedweapon's perspective, Gyo-ma looks incredibly cool. During one of their earlier meetings, Speedweapon had mentioned how much he admired heroes who would sacrifice themselves for others. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Amazing Appy. Subscribing makes sure you do not miss the next video, and it gives me motivation to keep improving the quality of every upload. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one.